you through that journey. So we're going to build on this now, and I'm going to start to create some of those bonds, some of those partnerships. So Nancy is my able and beautiful assistant. So I think, Nancy, what we're going to aim to do now in the next sort of 60 seconds is to create some virtual partnerships. So we're going to send you into a breakout room where you'll have an opportunity to talk to a colleague in the Ella network. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this discussion. And I'd encourage you to say hello, maybe talk a little bit about what is it you see around you, what did you put in the Mentimeter, but then go one step further towards creating that connection, that vulnerability, that closeness, and try and share something about you that the other person may just be a little surprised about. So for example, for me, I surprised myself during lockdown because I needed to get out and about, and I've found open water swimming, and I have become totally and utterly obsessed with open water swimming. So that's my thing. So Nancy, are we good? Are we ready to send everyone into a 2-minute breakout?
I was already, and people are chopping and changing and moving in and out of this. So I'm trying to assign people who don't have a partner into another room, but I should be ready in just...
We'll just fill the gap.
Just fill the gap. I was doing this all during the break, you'll know. And then some people came back, some people didn't. So, well, I'm going to send everybody to a room. I've got it timed, and we'll just see what happens. There will be some people that don't have a partner.
Well, hopefully, if you don't have a partner, just wave, and then we'll come find you, and we'll get you a partner.
Yeah, we will. So here we go. I'm going to open them now. Anyway, here we are.
Okay, welcome back, folks. So while you're on, if you want to come off mute or just wave at me, you know, how did that work? Did anyone get left on their own, or did you have a good conversation?
Yeah, it's good.
Let's get the thumbs up going. Superb. Hello, Rachel. Nice to see your face again. Good stuff. Right. If any of you didn't have a good conversation or was left on your own to talk to yourself, just drop Nancy a little note. We'll figure this out for the next time round. But hopefully you got a chance to meet a friend, build a friend. And if technology allows us, we will put you back into the same room later on to carry on some deeper conversations. So let's go. So what we did, for those of you that I worked with at the last conversation, we spent some time talking about this concept of virtual distance, and Paul referred to this earlier on, and we unpacked this a little bit, and we talked about the differences between physical distance, which makes it, you know, you can guess what that is, operational distance, which kind of is a little bit like the size of your team, the quality of the technology, and the skill we all have of using that technology, and then the final aspect of virtual distance, which is that affinity distance. And for those of you that were on that conversation, you know, what's absolutely important, the research and the practice shows that but we can manage this. We can reduce virtual distance, and the place where we get the biggest impact is by working on affinity distance. And affinity distance is all about those relationship bonds, making a friend, sharing something personal, talking about your home, the building that sort of real connection in a virtual world. It's also about breaking down some of those cultural barriers, developing shared mental models, so that when I say black, it means black, or when I say green, it means green to you. So there are certain things like that we can work on. And then the practical realities as a leader and a manager of creating real connection and alignment between the goals of the individual and the goals of the team. So those are some of the things that we talked about, but we're going to build on that because we also talked about the sort of the approach that my colleague Catherine's research has really highlighted about being human in this virtual world requires us to have a very high level of self-awareness. It really helps if we and our teams can adopt a growth mindset and build trust. And those four sort of real kind of key things that, again, Paul alluded to around demonstrating care, communicating well, creating connections, and being clear. Those are essential elements of being human and leading in a virtual world. But today we're going to take one step further, and I'm just going to introduce you to the six really essential behaviors and competencies that are important to us as leaders to be able to navigate this confusing, ambiguous, complex world that we live in, which happens also to be virtual. And at the same time, we need to be able to do it in such a way as that we create those connections, we inspire, and we bring out the best in people so that they truly can be their authentic self. So I'm just curious, there are 6 of these key attributes, and they've been taken from some work that a researcher, Paul Schumacher, and his team have done. On the chat, and I don't see the chat, so Nancy, I'm going to rely on you to shout some of this out. Have you got any idea what some of those 6 critical behaviors might be? So fastest finger on the button, pop some of your ideas into chat, and we'll see what you think.
People, do you want me to read them out, or?
Yeah, let's pull out a few.
Okay, listen, active listening, support, action, empathy, compassion. That's it so far. Wait, there's a couple more, sorry.
There's a couple more.
Understanding, open mind, and Sunayo mind. That's Danny. Communicating a vision, sense of belonging.
There, so we're starting to come closer towards it. Purpose. So what I'm talking about today is really sort of 6 high-level strategic skills that we as leaders, when we pull on them together, will help us to really elevate out, think strategically, and navigate this world. And those 6 are what we see in front of us, our ability to anticipate the unknown. So as leaders, we tend to be poor at spotting things that are unknown, ambiguous, those threats, those opportunities. So like some of the things that Paul talked about earlier on, those things that are on the periphery of our business, that we find that hard to be able to do that. And we don't always do that as consciously and as eloquently as maybe we could. The second aspect was challenge. And I think that relates a little bit to the activism that we talked about earlier on. So real strategic thinkers question everything. Especially their own and other people's assumptions. We really take time to actively invite different divergent views, and we examine problems in a very sort of constructive way. And that requires a lot of patience, a lot of courage, what you talked about, the listening, and keeping that very open mind. So to be able to challenge, we need to do that. We then need to interpret this conflicting, diverse information. And on each of these 6, we have to be good at all of them. And you can see how these start to link. That if we're good at challenge, if we're good at creating that sort of disparate, diverse viewpoints, we've got to be able to interpret that complexity. You need to be able to push to get to patterns, to get to deeper insights, to not be triggered, not to react instinctively, and to be able to reframe. We then need to be able to decide what to do once we've got those insights. And as leaders, I suspect every one of you will have been pushed on multiple times to make decisions quickly without all of the information that you need. And really, as strategic thinkers, we need to be able to push to be able to get pros and cons. We need to be able to get multiple options before we make that decision. We need to stop ourselves from getting locked into binary, yes, no, stop, go, right or wrong, and then go through a process by which we decide effectively, and processes that mitigate bias. We then need to get alignment to all of this decision making. We need to corral the troops, and those troops are no longer sitting at the desk next to us. They can be anywhere in the world, and increasingly will be more and more disparate the better we get at working virtually. So we need to be good at identifying our stakeholders. We need to be good at finding common ground, and then we need to be brilliant at getting buy-in across all of these divergent stakeholder groups. So that's about alignment. And then the last area is about learning. How good are we at role modeling, that openness to be wrong, to course correct? Because as leaders, you are the focal point of learning. How you behave, how you think, how you interact with people will help create or break that culture. And it will either stimulate or it'll kill a culture of inquiry, that search for personal growth. So that sort of ability to learn is essential. And a lot of the research and again the practice shows that typically we're not good at that one. We tend to be sort of happier, easier, more comfortable when we're punishing failure, when we're beating ourselves up. So those are the 6 strategic skills that we sort of focus on, and I wanted to bring to the conversation today. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to start to think about that in relation to yourself. So to help us do that, what I'm going to invite you to do, maybe over the next 57 seconds, is just reflect back on your last year, maybe just the last 4 months, because it's been a really different time for every one of you. And think about the work that you've done over the past 4 months, year, related to developing new strategies, to solving very complex business challenges and making these really tough decisions. And just spend maybe 50 seconds and think about when did you do it, and bring a couple of examples to your mind. If you've got a couple of examples, give me a sign. Thank you, Helen. Danny. Peter. Marion, thank you. Jackie, well, we're loving the technology now. We've got thumbs up in virtual space and on the technology. Brilliant. Okay, so I've probably given you a little bit of time. So now what you're going to need for the next session is the trusted pen, if you all have one, and hopefully you've printed out that sheet that we showed at the beginning, so your handout. Because what I'm going to do is to give you a chance to kind of dig into each of these areas just a little bit more. I'm going to ask you 2 questions against each one of these 6 areas. And it's going to be a little bit like the archetypal cosmopolitan quiz or the men's health quiz, which you may or may not have done in your past. And we'll just do a bit of a ready reckoner. And I'm going to get you to score yourself between 1 and 7, with 1 being, oh, I'm not so good at this. This is probably something that I've not practiced, through to 7 being, you know what, I do this consistently all the time and I'm really good at it. Does that make sense, everybody? Get some nods. Okay, so let's go into this. So let's move, if I can move my screen on one more. So we're going to go back to this first aspect. So this is all about our ability to anticipate things, spotting threats, opportunities right on the periphery of our organization. So that might be competitor threats, it might be organizational threats, it might be economy threats. And so the 2 questions I would ask of you, and rate yourself against that. So question 1 is, how often do you systematically gather information from a really wide network of experts, inside and outside your organization, your function, or your industry? Give yourself a score, 1 to 7. And then how often do you honestly, truly challenge yourself to predict the competition, what other organizations, people are doing? So potential moves, potential reactions to new initiatives or products. So I hope I've given you enough time. Give me some nods, give me some thumbs up. Right, yeah, brilliant. Okay, if I need to speed up, tell Nancy, because I think there's a button to say that, and then I'll speed up. So we're going to go on to the second area. So this is the challenge. This is the activism, I think. So, you know, if we're strategic in our thinking, we question everything. We question our own assumptions, our own biases, and other people's as well, and we do that well. We really suck in divergent views, and we stop before we act. We show patience, we show courage, and we really keep that open mind. So how often do you, one, reframe a problem from several angles and really push to understand root causes? And how often do you seek out those diverse views? Okay, when you're looking up, I think you're done. Giving you enough time. Scanning the faces, I've got some nods. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, they're saying, come on, Rees. Okay, so the third area then is this ability to interpret all of this myriad of complex information. So this is about getting, you know, to patterns, not jumping to your first conclusion. So how often do you really demonstrate curiosity and a true open mind? And how often do you actively test different hypotheses with other people before you come to your conclusion? Good, enough time? Good, 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 good. Okay, we're rattling through this. You're a great team. Okay, so we're moving on to decide. So when it comes to deciding, this is about when we have to make decisions with limited information. Do we get caught up in binary? Yes, no, stop, go. Do we have a really robust process? Are we confident that that kind of mitigates our own biases? So the questions here, how often do you balance long-term investment into growth with short-term pressure for results? I guess you'd have had to do a lot of that recently. How often do you determine consciously trade-offs? How often do you look at risks, unintended consequences, not just for you, not just for your team, not just the organization, but for your customer and stakeholders before you make decisions? Good. Okay, then. So we're now into that align piece. So once we've done all of that, we need to be awesome at creating alignment. We need to create common ground. We need to actively seek buy-in. And that's across this disparate, more virtual, less frequently connected network that we might be working on. How often do we build trust and get that real safety that Paul was talking about? So for you, two questions. How often do you assess your stakeholders' tolerance and their motivation for change? You know, really stand in their shoes and work out what makes them tick, especially in relation to what you're trying to achieve. And then how often do you pinpoint and address conflicting interests among stakeholders? Good, good, good. Excellent. We are nearly there. And then we're going into the final aspect. And this is about learning. You know, about you being a real role model and advocate for learning, creating that environment in your organization. So a couple of, you know, pointers to think about is how often then do you truly openly communicate stories about success and failure in equal measure? And then we've seen it a lot now in sort of political sort of arena, that ability to make decisions, move forwards, but course correct, and do that without judgment, without beating yourself up. So how often do you course correct on the basis of information that has now challenged your plan? And how often do you go through that even though you had made that decision? Great. Do we have scores on each of them? Excellent. Okay, so now we've done the Cosmopolitan Men's Health Score. What we're going to do now, this is where you will need your phone, because what I'm going to ask you to do is, looking at that sheet in front of you, you've got a landscape. You've probably already got a lens of the ones that you score higher and the ones that maybe you score lower in, and there may be some sort of aha moments going on already. But I'd like you now to average those scores for the 6 areas. And I'm going to show you the general average based on some research, and it's going to 2 decimal places. So you might just want to get it to 2 decimal places. So I'll give you sort of 2 minutes to do that. Nice one, Julie.
Rachel asks if you could explain the scoring again. To do the average, Emma.
Say that again, sorry.
Rachel, a couple people wanted you to explain how to record the scores. How do you average them?
Oh, great question. So on your phone, you just put score 1 plus score 2 divide by 2.
Yeah, a lot of people ask that. So there you go.
Sorry, I should add that to the instructions. Thank you very much. It's a long time, isn't it, since we go back and actually manually create things. Good, Tracy, we got a thumbs up.
Seriously.
Right, so if anyone is now struggling with anything, pop that in the chat, we'll address it. But I'm hoping that the majority of you, all of you, let's wait until everyone's done, you've got 6 scores average, so you have 1 overall score for each of the 6 areas. It was Paul Schumacher, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. When we send out these slides, I'll add in the reference, because I don't think I've got that reference on this slide.
I tried to put a possible spelling in there for you, but I put a 5 in there. I made a typo.
Close. So talk to me, team.
Somebody says they're a bit lost.
So you don't need to use Mentimeter for this. So the aim here is to just manually calculate an average of the 2 scores. So if you gave yourself a 5 on one of them and a 7 on the other, your average is going to be something like a 5.7.
Yeah. Or could they get on a calculator if they have a calculator?
Yeah, so that's what I mean by your phone.
Yeah.
So the calculator.
Yeah, calculator on your phone.
So
just add and divide by 2, isn't it?
Yep. So for example, if I was going to do an average of anticipate, I might have scored myself a 1 and a 4. So I would take the 1, I'd add it to the 4, that gives me a 5, and then I'd divide that by 2, which if my maths is correct, that would give me a 2.5. So that would be my average of those 2 scores. Okay, so I'm hoping now you've got, for anyone who hasn't got an average, what I'd encourage you to do now is to have a look at the landscape of the scores, because some of them in the boxes will be stronger. You might have a 7 and a 4, others you might have a 1 and a 3. So it's kind of one is higher and the other is lower. Great. So if you have got yourself to the magic average, what I thought would be helpful then is to just to give you a little bit of context, because Paul Schumacher and his team of researchers that developed these sort of the insight around these 6 skills. What they've done over the years is they've asked that same survey of multiple leaders all around the world, and they've captured then their averages. So these scores, these averages are based on about 20,000 plus respondents from people like you in very senior leadership positions all around the world. So what you can see is where they came out. So hopefully that gives you another lens to be able to say, hey, I'm better than the rest. Or ooh, maybe actually compared to a peer group, I'm just a little bit lower in that area than others. So I'll pause at this point. If there's any reflections, any questions practically, because I've asked you to use technology, go back to school, think about you. I've given you quite cognitively complex things to do.
Yeah.
Oh, Daniel, yes. And that's, I didn't say that at the beginning about being really dead honest. You don't have to share this with anyone. You can hide it in the bin. But you know, giving that yourself to be licensed to be kind, because as human beings, we do have a terrible tendency of devaluing ourselves. So we can have a bias towards being too critical on ourselves. Some of us can be deluded. And I think, Nick, you made a great point, because I'm seeing the chat now. You know, are we the best judge of ourselves? We're one judge, and this is a great set of questions that you could ask people that you trust, that you value, their insight on you, and get a little bit of feedback from peers to see whether they concur with how you scored yourself. So I hope now you have in front of you some scores, and I'm going to guide you through a couple of questions now, to see if we can get some insight from this and make sense of what we've got. So my first question to you is, what strengths has this highlighted for you? Maybe because your scores were high. Maybe because your scores were higher than the average. And what we're going to do now is we're going to test you a little bit further again, and we're going to go back to technology. And just let's stay with the strengths. And if you can, do the phone thing again. So let's get your phone out. Go to menti.com again, because what would be amazing is just to get a sense across the cohort of 60 of you now here, collectively, what are your top 2 strengths? Oh, let's see. Can you see all of this on the screen okay? Good, good, good. So I love the way that it moves around. So at the moment, we're good at challenge. Oh, no. So what's the bottom one? I can't quite see which one that is. What's missing? It's decide that's missing at the bottom. So are we all in? Who's missing? Have you all had chance? Okay, it's kind of settling down. So that's really interesting. So as a cohort, we seem to be spiking nicely on that learn aspect, which kind of contradicts some of the sort of the research that says, you know, a lot of organizations, we're not so good at that, and we're good at challenge. So that that ability to question, and maybe that goes hand in hand. And it's kind of really interesting to see how that either confirms or might sort of contradict any other data that you have on yourself. So team, you are great, best at learning, challenging, and deciding. Fantastic. Okay, so here we go. We've got a lens on our strengths. We can then look at the other aspect. So Paul Schumacher, when he did his research, he came to the conclusion that really this approach is different to traditional leadership thinking, which is, what are we great at and how can we really leverage that and maybe fix some critical gaps? What this showed to him in terms of being, you know, able to navigate through these really complex, paradoxical times, we need to be good at all 6. Because strength in one genuinely doesn't compensate for a strength in another. But what I'm going to invite you to do now is to look back at your scores again, and just think, if you were going to focus on dialing up, getting better at, being more comfortable with one area, where would you start? Okay, so let's go one more back to the wonderful Mentimeter. And I can't move this. If you can go back to your phones, and we'll have one more quiz. And let's see collectively across this group, what is the one aspect that would help you the most if you were to work on it? Oh, challenge. How's it going? Oh, back to learn. Here we go. It's a race now. How many of you? I need to work out with Mentimeter how I can see whether everyone's had a go. So I'm still learning this technology myself. Okay. Is anyone else still to go? Challenge is creeping up. No, it's moving around. We're leveling. Challenge. Oh, keep going, guys. This is lovely. We've paused. No, we haven't. Anyone still to go? Okay, I think we have a wrap on that one then. So it sounds like, as a group, what's going to be make the biggest difference there is that anticipate skill. And actually, there were some of you in the group already that felt that was a strength. So what we're going to do now, we have just enough time to make this happen. So given now you've done some thinking about yourself, you know your strengths, you know the one area you want to work on, we're going to draw this to a conclusion by giving you a little bit more time to think about yourself. So I'm going to still give you 9 minutes for this exercise. So Nancy hopefully is going to get you back into the group that you started with. And what I'd invite you to do then is share as little or as much as you like about what came out of that exercise for you. And then to work as that wonderful corporate citizen to community you could do to help you with that. So it's one final question back to the lovely menti.com, and just maybe take a minute and maybe share a thought, and it will come up on the screen and we'll capture it and we can give that back to Daniel and the team to see. So Rachel, I was talking about in that respect, it was biggest strengths in relation to the survey that you've just done, which I hope you kind of went down that track. Is there any other share your biggest strengths so you can start to figure out in amongst your peers who can you draw on to help you? How to run remote strategic planning process, definitely, because you've got different processes to get an outcome with a group. You've got technology that you need to grasp. And I think, like we talked about, how do you create that psychological safe space for people to share, to interact? Great. Keep it coming, because we'll take this offline, we'll share it, and maybe we'll get some insights as to what further development or help that the Ella team can give you as a group.
Emma, thank you. Will we get these Mentimeter results when you share the deck with us afterwards? Will we get? Oh, fantastic! So we can all read them. That's brilliant. I love your bravery on trying Mentimeter and 2 breakouts. You really have brought a huge amount of interaction, and it's given us all an opportunity to discuss with each other, which is really what I wanted to do, and try and get that in there. So thank you so much for doing that. For me personally, that was a great bit of self-reflection. I'm good at my relationship kind of thing. And the thing that I really took out of it, all of it, from all of the 6 strengths and everything else, was this importance of connection. And yeah, that's kind of where you started, but it really has highlighted that for me. So thank you so much for that, Emma. We're gonna